TopMedTalk.
Well, hello and welcome to TopMedTalk. We are at Euroanesthesia 2022, excited to be in person, live from the trade exhibition on the GE Healthcare booth. I'm Desiree Chappell, your host, and I'm joined by Solomon Aronson. Hello, Saul.
Hi, Desiree. It's just so good to be here after a night of fun and,
a wonderful day at the
social-
meeting
Yeah,
yesterday,
that's right,
too,
that's
Saul.
right. We're in Milan, Italy, having fun at Euroanesthesia 2022.
That's right.
And we're here with the buzz and the electricity and the people. How cool is that?
It's amazing. Well, we are on the GE Healthcare booth and had a really fabulous day here yesterday with a new launch.
A number of products were introduced officially after years in the making. Confetti and Prosecco and all the accoutrements that go with it. Yes,
it was really interesting. So be sure to check that out. Well, Saul, we've had some really great conversations. Going to continue over the next day and a half. But we have a guest with us today at lunchtime here, Rupert Pearse. Hello, Rupert. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for asking me along.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Well, Rupert, for those who may not know you, which there's probably not very many people, I don't think.
Both of those people left. Tell those two people who you are.
Who you are and what you do.
My name's Rupert Pearse. I'm an intensive care doctor in London, and I've got a big research interest in perioperative medicine.
You do.
And a new role officially to bring that forward.
There's always a new job.
Yes. Well, share. Please share.
Well, I've got a couple of new things that I'm doing. I've got a new role to lead research for my hospital and my university to build infrastructure for everybody's work, not just for the stuff that we do. And I also work with the National Institute for Health Research in the UK, helping to lead their funding decisions and make sure that we commission some really, really fantastic research, again, for all patients in all areas.
So give us a peek behind the covers and help us get a sense of what are those new and fascinating projects that we can look forward to.
Well, I mean, in the UK, research has obviously had a big whack because of the pandemic. There was a lot of research that had to stop during the pandemic. Then we did a whole load of new research, and we devoted all of our resources to delivering COVID research. And then during the pandemic, there was new research being set up that was waiting to go when the pandemic ended. And then, of course, there's research just being funded all the way through. So we've found ourselves, as the pandemic sort of finally ended properly, there's a massive amount of research that needs to be delivered, much, much more than we normally have. There are some studies that have been really struggling during the pandemic, struggling to recruit, struggling to complete. And we've got a big job now to decide, which research is the biggest priority, which research do we devote our resources to, and what are the research questions that we have now as a society in terms of health and wellness. How
has COVID, it is that thing that we're going to talk about, hopefully, as in the past, but how has that changed our prioritization of what those pressing questions are for having to make funding decisions and allocating scarce resources? Or has it not?
I think that's an interesting question, because what I think it's done is it's really clarified the priorities that we kind of already knew about. I think the pandemic has magnified the inequalities in society in terms of health outcomes. It's magnified our understanding of when bad things happen to people in terms of health. It happens to the underserved in our society. It happens to people of low incomes. It happens to people in minority ethnic groups, and so on. And understanding those inequalities, being that health outcomes will disproportionately disadvantage the underserved. So the poor get poorer in every sense, health equaling wealth. And all of those notions have been absolutely proven beyond any doubt during the pandemic. And so we're now sort of really having to double down on making sure that the research that we do properly addresses the needs of all of society. So, for example, in the UK, if you don't, when you're applying for a major funding from a big funder, whichever one they are, if you don't show how patients and society have helped you shape your research idea, you're going to really struggle to get funded. If you don't show how you are going to make sure you recruit patients in the parts of the UK where patients with those diseases are most commonly affected, then you're going to struggle to get funded. If you don't show how you've got equality of diversity and inclusion, not just in terms of how you recruit patients, but how your trial is led, then you're going to struggle to get funded. And I think those are all good things. It makes me slightly nervous that, in my own work, that I'm not doing well enough in those areas. And I think it's good that people like me are, on the rack a little bit to really find better ways of delivering better research for everybody.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I think it just raises our consciousness, though we all have unconscious, inclinations to not let us know what we don't know. And I think it's a really good answer. I think it's a really good point. I think that's equally true for the point of view and perspective in the States as well. I think COVID has really, as you said, accentuated that which we already knew, but really didn't pay enough attention to. That said, what are the questions that have raised to the surface?
So I don't think that. I think what's the most striking thing in terms of research is not what research we're choosing to do; it's how we're choosing to do it. Oh. So you may be familiar with the recovery trial of COVID treatments, which was a particular design called a platform trial. So you don't design one trial with one research question on one drug and then close it and then get ethics approval and all the other approvals for another new trial and set that one up. You set up one enormous trial and then you change the treatments in. You swap some in and you swap some out. And, in some cases, patients may be getting multiple treatments within that trial. And that makes it much more efficient to deliver the research quickly. It's certainly cheaper. It certainly massively reduces the bureaucracy around getting research set up, which is always the killer for research. Is the amount of time it takes to get through all the regulatory paperwork. It really, really slows everything down. So how can big research funders deliver platform trials? Because the problem with a platform trial is, well, if you're a funder, you want a fixed price tag. You want everything costed out in detail. And the whole notion of a platform trial is it doesn't stop. You keep that trial running for as long as you need to keep running, for as long as there are questions that need answering. So how does a funder decide how to cost that? How do you fund it for a certain number of years, or what do you do? And if you're funding a platform trial, well, they haven't decided what treatments they're going to be studying yet. There may be cost implications for that we don't know. So funders are needing to adapt to that new situation. The other big area is in what I call research delivery. Is those of us who are involved in like the hospital end. In research being set up in the UK, each hospital has to approve the new trial and have to go through a set of paperwork to get it set up. Sometimes some hospitals are very, very slow at that, and if you've got a 40-hospital trial and all of those hospitals are taking ages to do that paperwork, and you're sitting there tapping your wristwatch waiting for your trial to start recruitment, that can be a real challenge. So do we need to look again at all of that local paperwork? Let's say your trial's got ethics approval, it's been approved by the drug regulator, it's ready to go, and then one hospital is asking one set of questions about your trial and another hospital is asking a different set of questions. Well, why is that? Can we harmonize all of that, speed all of that up? And that cripples research in every country. Each hospital thinks it's clever by asking a different set of questions, thinks the other hospitals aren't very good by not asking those questions. Everyone thinks they're doing it the right way. And all of that really slows our research down. And what I say to people is, in most trials, if every hospital site opened to recruitment on the same day as the lead site, we wouldn't have any trials with delayed recruitment. And so that's another big area where we need to think about what research we deliver. But I think you're nudging me to talk about topics, aren't you, rather than the research itself?
I'm letting you go in any direction you want. But yes, okay, as long as you brought it up, go for it.
Well, I mean, you're a researcher at heart. I mean, you're involved in a lot in perioperative medicine. What are some of the themes that you're seeing coming out, especially, after COVID, everything that we've been through,
So I think in perioperative medicine, there's been a really noticeable shift, especially in the UK, towards big pragmatic research, answering the big simple questions. So I think we're seeing that in lots of different countries, but for example, in the UK, we're seeing a trial that's just started on inhalational anesthesia versus intravenous anesthesia.
Oh.
Now that's a common, very basic question that a lot of anaesthetists face every day at work. We ought to have comparative data on that. We ought to be able to tell people which of those approaches is better, or are they the same, and why. So there's questions around that. We've just seen a trial funded. It's in setup at the moment on Sagamedex versus the UK standard neostigmine. We ought to have a big trial telling us whether Sagamedex is better or not, because Sagamedex causes a lot of allergy.
Yeah.
And if you go to Japan, it's expensive. But also, if you go to Japan, a lot of people have Sagamedex allergy because it's the muscle relaxant reversal they use.
Yeah.
So should we use it? Should we risk that allergy problem or not? We need a big, simple trial that gives us a big, simple answer. There are questions around blood transfusion still in patients who've got ischemic heart disease, especially high-risk patients, so we're seeing trials around that. Trials on hematinics, how you optimize red cell mass. And so it goes on. In a global health sense, in low and middle income countries, there's a very, very large trial called Penguin that's looking at high versus low oxygen concentration in terms of surgical site infection. That's been a very controversial question in perioperative medicine for some years. Just needs a very big, very simple trial to just put it to bed once and for all. And that shift, I think, to me, has always been an obvious one because we've got an enormous patient population. We've been running around doing trials of 20, 30, 40 patients when we should be doing trials, well, not just of thousands of patients, but tens of thousands of patients. We have the patients to do that.
And you really feel like there'll be a definitive answer from that we can really put it to bed with some of those big trials like that?
Yeah, I definitely do.
Versus the answer being, it depends.
Yeah.
Well, it depends may be the right answer. I mean, we've got to get away from this idea of there being an expected answer to a particular research question. And when you do a trial and it doesn't deliver that expected answer, that somehow the trial is a failure. The failing is our understanding. Now, if you've got two alternative anesthetics and they're both equally good, I think that's a really useful answer, as you can tell people, if you feel that for a particular patient, intravenous anesthesia has got an advantage, you can go ahead in the confidence that that's a safe thing to do. If you feel that you're not very good at delivering intravenous anesthesia, maybe you're anxious that patients will suffer from awareness and that's a big problem for you as an anaesthetist, and you wish to deliver an inhalational anesthesia, then that's a safe thing to do. Alternatively, if you've got environmental concerns, then you don't need to worry about patient safety in terms of TIVA if you don't want to use volatile anesthetics. Two things being as good as each other is not an unhelpful thing.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. And the more we know about what actually works and how, then the better treatment choices we make for our patients.
It's interesting because I feel like that it just some of that becomes weaponized, whenever it's not. I mean, people who are opponents start to, use it against one another. I mean, it's like, well, then we don't have to do TIVA. It's more expensive, or, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I just kind of feel like sometimes it does. And it's us who are needing to understand how we understand it better.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're right in that some senses people do that, but that's only when they're being disingenuous, right? Yeah. If you've really got a genuine patient-centered reason for doing a particular type of thing, in your practice. If you can examine your conscience and say, genuinely, I want to deliver TIVA because I think it's better for my patients, and here's some evidence that supports my position. As long as you're looking at all of the evidence, not just that one trial that suits your argument, then I think that's fine. But, you know, if you are misrepresenting your reason for a particular type of clinical practice, then you're not an honest clinician, and you won't help your patients that way. And that's about probity in practice, really. But yeah, research is misrepresented a lot in that way. It's true.
We're obviously just having a casual conversation, and there's no, objective here other than to have good conversation. So I'm going to offer this for us to discuss. It struck me in the midst of this conversation that we're talking about comparing, the red pill to the blue pill, and trying to decide if there's superiority or non-inferiority, and how we design and who we design it for, and all those things are good. Never have we mentioned the variable of the provider in the context of these studies, and I beg the question: isn't that something that we may need to do? TIVA in, one person's hands may be superior to, volatile in another, or vice versa, what have you, or, some of the other things that we're talking about. And I'm just curious, and it's just, me offering for free association, the discussion of when and how can we interdigitate the skill sets or competence or behaviors of the provider in the comparative analysis that we do.
So just to clarify, because in the UK a provider is sometimes an organisation, but you're talking about an individual
clinician,
healthcare practitioner, aren't you? Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing I'd say is, who is the arbiter of that skill? Who is the person representing it? Because if I'm an anaesthetist and I say, well, in my hands, TIVA is a better option. Well, what objective evidence do I have for that apart from my own opinion? I might argue that I'm the most experienced observer of my own practice, but some people might say I've got a bias. So, like, if that's if the person representing it is me, well, then I'm sorry, I'm not an objective observer. But if what you're saying is that we're going to bring people in and observe our practice and say, well, look, dude, you're better at TIVA, and this other person, they're better at inhalational, then yeah, sure, I'm up for that. But if what you're saying is people should just go around and champion regional anesthesia and put YouTube videos up that demolish their clinical trials because basically the result didn't suit them, well, and then they finish up with, in my hands, I'm amazing at regional anesthesia. Well, maybe you are, maybe you aren't.
I'm not taking a position on it, and I'm not editorializing. I'm just making the observation. The other thought that triggered the comment, because it's not anything more than that, is we spoke earlier to provider compliance with alarm fatigue and or inclination to respond to that, and that there was an 85% responsiveness to a signal, a nudge, an alarm that has been shown to be that sort of threshold, level of modifying, outcome. Some people are more inclined to respond to an alarm than others. It's human nature. Human nature is complex stuff. So it's in the broadest context of the human nature variable in some of these comparative analysis studies, and it's very hard to control for that. And that's my comment. It's just an observation.
I think that's a very valid comment. Yeah. But what we've got to remember is that the voices that we hear, the influencers, as it were, that idea of in my hands is something that's very prominent. Each anaesthetic department will have somebody who thinks they are, or maybe other people think they are, a particularly talented individual in terms of delivering a particular type of anaesthetic technique. And maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But what you've just described is objective observation of people's individual skill sets, and then how you use that to shape the way that maybe they may most be effective in clinical practice. I think that's a brilliant idea. I'm all up for that.
Hard to do.
But if that evidence is me telling everybody else in the department that I am amazing at
It's not self-reported.
TIVA or regional anaesthesia, then that's got to be a nonsense, right?
Yeah,
but we fall for it over and over and over again.
We drink our own Kool-Aid all the time, and I just share that observation. I just saw Top Gun Maverick, and I had and so I share that only because I had this very wonderful, interesting conversation with a Top Gun pilot. Afterwards, I went to a private showing and all that sort of stuff. And we got into the drone versus fighter pilot kind of discussion. And earlier we were talking to Monty about artificial intelligence being the trigger to turn the fluid up or the vasopressor down, as opposed to your sense of judgment. And it's a incredibly complex story. And
so I think
where does research penetrate that?
Yeah.
Well, there is all sorts of mixed methods research that can flush that kind of stuff out.
Yeah.
But the other thing you've got to remember is that we're going to achieve far more improvement in patient outcomes, far more societal benefit by looking at our average and improving it.
Yeah. Okay.
We're not going to achieve very much benefit for society if we take our very, very best performance and then try and improve that. Because our very, very best performance is probably pretty much hit the glass ceiling or is very close.
Raise the basement.
It's our average performance. Yeah. And so the research that I do and I'm interested in is all about making our average better. Yeah. And I don't see that in any way has a conflict with individuals being individually talented in a crafts-based specialty.
Perfectly good answer.
That's brilliant. I just think that some folk, and it's a minority who are very vocal, just need to be very careful with how they use their reputation to influence others.
Yeah, good answer.
Yes, agree. Yeah. Well, Rupert, what are you personally kind of working on, some of the projects that you have coming through the pipe? I mean, your name is all over on a lot of different things, but what are some of the things you're working on right now?
So probably the biggest single projects we've got, it's been slowed down by the pandemic, but we've got a big project going on shared decision making for older but high-risk patients.
Interesting.
And whether we can improve their decision regret by giving them a more individualized forecast. I don't say prediction, I say forecast of what outcomes they might experience. So all the off-target things like poor mobility, poor cognitive function, and so on. Whether knowing those things helps them make a better decision. We're just about to start a clinical trial of a piece of software that gives that individualized forecast for them to see whether that improves things. But we've been doing a lot of qualitative research and epidemiology as well, and various sort of experimental decision-making scenarios with patients. And the interesting thing is that program so far of research, what we seem to be seeing is that this group of patients don't really want to know
that's what I was
that things could go wrong. Wow. They are like, but my hip hurts, doctor. My hip hurts a lot, and I've been told an operation can fix that, so I want an operation. Yeah. And us talking about maybe the possible off-target cognitive outcomes is like, well, look, you're the doctor, fix me.
Where in that conversation do you bring in the surgeon's point of view?
I think it all needs to be bundled in together. I think one of the hard things we've learned is there is no single point where a decision gets made. We don't collate all of the evidence, then put it on the table and go, right, everybody, let's sit down and let's have a conversation about what's best in this scenario. What happens, like in the UK, the moment the primary care physician refers you to see a surgeon, the decision is being made. The process has started. And for some patients, being referred to see some surgeons, that will be it. Well, the surgeon will say, well, you've come to see me, so you want surgery, right? Yeah. But for other surgeons, there'll be a much more detailed discussion about what the benefits of surgery might be. Now, that's one surgeon in one hospital with one patient. You may find that surgeon's colleague has a different approach. And you might find that if you go to a different hospital, they've got a different approach. And if you look at different specialties, they've got different approaches. And so there's no one simple, neat decision node where that conversation happens. And that makes getting the expert anaesthetist doing preoperative assessment involved in that conversation very, very difficult. And so that place where the patient, the surgeon, the whole multi-professional team coming together and making a decision for the patient is very difficult. And certainly there are certain types of surgery, and I think cardiac surgery particularly suffers from this, where the patient is nowhere. The patient is nowhere in that decision-making process because the technical experts come along, they look at the coronary arteries, they look at what the best technical solution is, and they say, well, for you, Saul, this coronary artery bypass graft, that's what we're offering you. And you're like, well, what are my choices? And it's like, well, there aren't any. Well, you can have the surgery or not have the surgery. That's your choice. Yeah. And that's not really shared decision-making.
No, I would totally agree with that. Are there, I mean, in the research that you've done, is there a lot of regret after surgery?
There is evidence that people will regret their decision, but there's very little evidence that before they make the decision that they realize that could happen.
Yeah.
And so it's a very, very complicated, a very, very individualized situation. And you've got a lot of, in particular, anaesthetists who are looking after older, high-risk people. And they're very worried that they may be criticised. In the UK, our General Medical Council, who regulates us as doctors, makes shared decision-making a standard of care. So that's a legal requirement on us.
How is it documented?
Yeah.
How's what shared decision-making documented? Yeah. Well, it's very variable. And in many cases, it's not documented. So the conscientious folk are looking at that older patient who maybe they've got diabetes, maybe they've got chronic kidney disease and one or two other problems, and maybe they're having colorectal surgery, and how do all of those things come together to affect their outcome, and what's the most likely adverse outcome we should be telling them about, and how do we know all of that? And are we just guessing, or are we using actual epidemiology to guide us in what we tell them about? And what about the softer outcomes? What about the mobility outcomes, the independence outcomes, the cognitive outcomes? For me, it may be that cognitive outcome is the most important thing. For you, it might be function. You might want to walk. Those are things that are different between you and me. And so knowing which things to talk about, and knowing what they're going to be for that individual patient is incredibly difficult. And I think a lot of doctors are really worried about that.
That is so interesting. Well, Rupert, we could talk all afternoon, but I know that you're extremely busy. But thank you so much for sitting down with us and sharing some of that. We're going to definitely look forward to it. Anything else that you want to share, some big projects you're working on?
As you say, we could talk all day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again. You can join us anytime. And be sure to check us out on TopMedTalk. You can always find us on your favorite social media platform, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. We're there. Rupert's on Twitter, too. Check him out. There's some great. We didn't even go there, but check his Twitter feed out. It's really great. And we are live from Euroanesthesia 2022 for another day and a half. So lots of great content still coming your way. Check it out on TopMedTalk. Everyone have a great afternoon.
Ciao,
Cheers.
ciao.
Ciao.
Thanks very much.
TopMedTalk.
Desiree Chappell with TopMedTalk. It has been an exciting year, and there is so much more to come. Now, I'm joined here with Monty Mythen. Monty, what is coming up?
Well, next, TopMedTalk are going to be coming to you live from the European Society of Anaesthesiology from Milan in Italy. You'll find us on the GE booth in the trade exhibition. We'll be there intermittently, and we'll probably pop up in a few other places. So I'm there with Desiree, and Sol Aronson's coming in, and Henry Howe. And after that, Desiree, where do we go?
It is time for the 25th anniversary World Congress of Perioperative Medicine. in London, right? Live.
From the UCL campus to celebrate our 25th anniversary. So that's really exciting. And then I think we've got the next one in August with your organization in America.
It is. It's in Chicago. It's the American Association of Nurse Anesthetists. Monty and I are going to pop up there, have some great conversations, and then it's on to
Dingle. So that takes us into the autumn and winter season. More about that to follow.
And then, of course, we're going to be rounding out the year with the American Society of Anesthesiologists in New Orleans for their annual Congress. So super excited about all the events for the year. Don't miss us. Be sure to check us out on TopMedTalk.com and on your favorite podcatcher. We are there with late-breaking anesthesia and perioperative news. Right, Monty?
Absolutely. See you soon.
Cheers.